watching the Week in Review, our weekly trawl through 10 of the big stories from the week. And as ever, here to go through them with me is friend and colleague Mohammed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, same welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adi.
Thank you. And to our viewers, this is how it works. As I've said, 10 stories from the week. We take the really big ones and we go through them in some detail. Just a warning, we spend a bit more time on some stories than we do on others. So some might take 6-7 minutes, some might take only 1 minute. Don't panic. We talk about the 66 deaths of children from having inhaled or partaken rather cough syrup from an Indian company. A lot of blocks of cocaine that have been seized by drug law enforcement agencies. Corruption at Africa's seaports. They're big, they handle a lot of trade, but they're very, very corrupt. We also look at the benefits package for the National Health Insurance Scheme. So 4 of the stories and lots more besides. So let's get cracking, shall we? There really is only one place to start. All over the world, everybody is talking about Gambia, and they're talking about Gambia for all the wrong reasons. 66 children have died in a very short space of time, and it turns out all of them had taken a particular or some brands of a cough syrup produced in India. It's a scandal. Have a look.
Named in the alert issued by the WHO, names one company as being responsible, namely Maidane Pharmaceuticals Limited of India. In 2014, the company was subject to a criminal case in India. The case was squashed in 2016 on the grounds that the case should have been brought against the company, not the individual directors. The questions now are, will recalling of these syrup medicines prevent the further spread of the acute kidney disease? Are the death rates of these children even underreported by the authorities? For now, these questions remained unanswered.
Mr. Mboj, several questions asked there by our colleague Mamadou Gajaga. However, the big question that I've been getting asked, ironically, people have been sending me clips from all over the world. Has anybody been sacked over this? Before we get into that, what's been your take on what I said is a scandal, really?
Unbelievable, Adi. What are the facts? At least 66 dead.
Sure.
Yes?
That we know.
Yeah, we know.
Sure.
Yes. And then why? They were not sort of suffering from any predisposition, genetic predisposition to any disease,
That's right.
which brought about their death. And their parents, they went to the pharmacy as anybody would do. It was all reasonable.
Sure.
Now these children are gone. Somebody somewhere must pay for it.
For sure.
Where was the point of failure?
This is it. We did an interview with the Medicines Control Agency, a lady from there, and she said that I was baffled by it. She said they were legally imported into the country, but they were not legally registered with the Medicines Control Agency, which I couldn't get my head around that particular phrase at all. And if anybody doesn't believe me, they can watch the interview. I'm not making this up. But as you said, somebody must pay because there's been a huge failure somewhere. Mentioned there in the story of the fact that in 2013 they were tested in India, and then by 2014 drug regulators in Haria state felt they had enough of a case to take the company to court, which they did. They won the case because they took the directors individually, not the company, to court. In 2017, I found out just before I came on air, a similar case in India was taken against them. So they have a previous poor record, and yet they were able to export only to the Gambia.
That was the curious thing for me as well. Why only to Gambia?
For a
So
small
that's
country.
it. We looked around. So this is really the key. Are we easy pickings? Who initiated
Sure.
whatever to buy those drugs? So there are a good number of questions here that must be answered, really. The importers, which particular importer
who imported
imported this?
Yeah, indeed.
Really? You mean this person didn't know about the litigations
Yeah, quite.
in 2013, 2017?
Quite. I mean, and the one in 2013 dragged on till May of this year, May 2022, before They finally dismissed the case against the company. But in that time, they were not allowed to sell the drugs. And the same drugs that we're talking about, they were not allowed to sell it in that state, in India.
Absolutely. This is just unbelievable. So how did we have these drugs come in here? I know that we do not have a laboratory,
Sure.
Granted, but does that mean that we just take whatever importer says, we just take them on their word
Well, this is
and let things in?
Yeah.
Surely there must be plan B.
Well, indeed.
Isn't it?
And plan B could be leaning on neighboring countries that have labs where they can test and say, we'll sign an MOU with Senegal, with Cape Verde, and say, we will send these, if you want to import into the Gambia, we don't have the lab to test this, because it's drugs to be ingested by humans, they will be tested, and if they're not up to standard, they will not come in. And the reason I say that is because the substance, the contaminants that have been found is what is the scary thing. It's antifreeze that you use in your car in cold countries, and it's also the stuff that is used in servicing air conditioners. They're not for human consumption. They should be nowhere near any medicines or anything that anybody ingests, and yet they were found in significant quantities in there to stop their sale. And as a result of this whole case, I have spent most of the last couple of days watching Indian television, the ones that broadcast in English. And there are at least 24 of them that I found on YouTube. All of them cover this. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has set up a special investigating panel to look at it. So they're trying to do something similar and serious at that level. I've not heard of any investigatory panel here.
And on the day that the story broke, our National Assembly was in session.
Till midnight.
Till midnight. We thought that because of the severity of the situation,
Sure.
at least one of them might sort of want to make a statement. They've got this thing called making a statement, for pressing issues and of national importance.
That's right.
Nobody did.
Yeah.
And then afterwards we had an address
Yeah, quite.
from our president.
From the president.
What did it say?
Well, this is it. It was, if I can be blunt, it was a disappointment because the anger didn't come through. Yes, he expressed condolences to the families. He thanked partners, international partners. He said that we had acted quickly. I don't think anybody believes that. We had not acted. 66 children had died. And he also said the number of deaths were not unusual in that time span. Now, before we came on air, I spoke to a doctor at Edward Francis Small, and he said perhaps he didn't mean in relation to that specific condition or circumstance. He meant 66 children in the country would have died. That's all well and good. But we are talking about 66 who died from a specific, particular incident because they ingested something they should not have.
Absolutely. We're just trying to be a bit of whitewashing there.
Indeed.
Because this is the key.
Sure.
66 from AKI, acute kidney injury. Absolutely, over what, 2 months?
That's
I
right.
mean, we all remember when Dr. Mustafa, was it Mustafa
Bitte?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When they came on air and said that they had noticed
Sure.
this sort of high, this incidence of
Yes,
deaths from AKI, and then afterwards that's when we got to know about this.
Sure.
So this is really unbelievable. I can't believe that was the sort of address that the president gave, because there we should have heard from him that we were going to get to the bottom of this.
Sure.
How did this drug get into this country?
This is
Who were the people involved, responsible, who should have made sure that it didn't?
Sure.
So that's really the sort of talk that one wants.
That's what
and
we
then
should
the
have heard.
tightening of the system, because this is really what happens in the end.
Sure.
This could have been anybody. It could have affected anybody. How many times when we had our kids, have we bought paracetamol syrup? Yes, you do.
I mean, the irony of it was the person whose voice we heard in the story there, Mamadou Gajaga, when I showed the picture and said, go and do this story, he went, That's the one I've been giving my children, and he pointed to one of them.
Absolutely.
And if people saw the full story, one of our colleagues, Nde Sen, she also spoke on the program, and she said, that is one of the ones that I've been giving my child up to now. In fact, the child is in the office as we speak, and he does have a cough, but of course, because of what has happened, she has stopped giving him anything. And that's just two of our colleagues who work in one single unit here. So lots and lots of parents will be very concerned, and they wanted to hear strong words about what would happen, who should pay for this.
And you know that somewhere in this country there are parents still giving this.
You know it. I mean, the Red Cross, in case people want to know, they're going around house to house trying to convince people to come out and give it to them, and they can dispose of it so that they're not leaving it with these parents or even asking the parents to dispose of it. The Red Cross is saying, we will safely dispose of these. And that's quite a task because people here, and this came up again in the office, people say when people get ill, they don't have a GP like they do in England or in many Western countries. They go to the pharmacy and they tell them their symptoms and they give them something over the counter. And that's the experience of most people. And when I ask people, that's exactly what they said. And so, as you rightly say, in some remote areas, they haven't heard this because I don't know if the messages have been done in all languages. So there might be some parents who are unaware and they're still giving these. So it is really, really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. One will just hope that, because a lot of people have more bias in their through social media, so that's it. So they will spread it as it were. And we also hope that people will take it seriously.
Sure.
We know how official communication, how people do it. Sometimes they get skeptical with these official communications.
That's right.
So you hope that all of these things would go right, because this is really a huge scandal. The other day when we discussed it on Drive Time, we said, can we sue somebody?
Well, this is
One has to be able to sue. These people must be compensated, the victims.
They really must. And you could go after the importer, you could go after the Medicines Control Agency. So many, and of course the manufacturers will be harder because they're in India, and as we've seen, there's been lots and lots of litigation. I found 2 already. I'm sure if I scratched a bit more, I'll find more, because I suspect. And in what's interesting is that in both cases, it was because they were trying to stop them from selling the drug, the very things that we're talking about, in India, and yet somehow they managed to be able to say, oh, well, let's find a country where they don't have any controls, and let's send it there. And this is where we are.
I really can't get my head around that one, the fact that we're the only country where they've sent this. And then politically it's very interesting here, Ade. It seems as if we do not want to upset Indians.
Well, this is it.
Sort of, to my mind, things have been quite lukewarm. The response, really, from the political, really, the executive and the private. It's been quite lukewarm, given the outrage.
Well,
this should generate. But let's make a distinction here, aren't we?
Sure.
Here, our problem is not with India.
Sure.
Not the land of Nehru and Gandhi, not simply the Mahatma and Indira, the land of these great people. This is about a particular company called Made in Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you.
That's where our problem is, not with India.
This is it.
So let's deal with that.
There's a danger we'll spend the whole program talking about this. But it is of such significance that, to be honest, I wouldn't mind if we didn't even discuss anything else. Well, thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now on to our second story. This coast, the sub-region of West Africa, has become known as something of a drugs hub between South America and Europe. Recently, there was a huge seizure of cocaine here in the Gambia. Have a look.
You have witnessed the preliminary analysis was conducted, and they indicate the presence of cocaine, while the confirmatory test will be done in the lab. Also, after weighing it, it weighed 840 kilograms, 300 grams.
It is said this is the first time there has been such a light drug seizure by drug law enforcement operatives in the Kanifing municipality. Commissioner Juma Sow is the Drug Law Enforcement Agency's Regional Commissioner for KM.
This is a very tactical operation that we did. And actually, we've been surveying these people for more than almost close to 2 months. We've been gathering intelligence on them.
gathering intelligence on them, Mr. Amboch, and they've been under surveillance for quite a while. And it's a significant seizure. And interestingly, there was one of equal size in Nigeria, just 2 days after the one. I don't know if they're linked, but they also announced one. And this is a danger, isn't it? Because there's so much money that can be made of this. I mean, in case anybody's wondering, this one on the market could probably, I don't know, fetch $20 million.
Yes.
So that's a significant.
So we are more than $1 billion. Something
yeah.
like that.
Sure.
But this is what you see, what intelligence policing does. This is what we talk about all the time.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely huge. And as you've said, it is so profitable. The trade is so profitable.
Sure.
And Gambia has been sort of a hub, been a sort of a transit point.
A transit point.
For a very long time. The Gambia and Guinea-Bissau and the like. So
sure.
This is it. But the more we make these seizures, you make it difficult.
Sure.
Absolutely. Then they begin to see that perhaps Gambia is not an easy target.
Yeah, sure.
Having said that, our previous story, look at our previous story.
This is
it seems we are an easy target, apparently. Sure. But this is good. This is fine.
Yeah.
You know, we just never know how many have gone through.
Well,
of course, you never know that. So to contextualize it all. Sure. But the more seizures we make, and with the intelligence policing, not just with drugs, I mean other areas as well, basically too, then absolutely good thing.
Better. So yeah, thumbs up to the drug law enforcement people, and let's hope this is a warning shot to those who might be thinking of using the Gambia.
That's it, and the 6 arrested. Now what next?
5 Sierra Leoneans, I'm sad to say.
And a woman in there.
A woman who apparently was the first person to be arrested, and then under threat of being the only one sent down, decided to implicate everybody else and take them to where the huge cache of drugs was stored.
I think when we say girl power, I'm not sure this is what we meant.
Quite.
Really. And now what happens to this cocaine, I wonder?
What happens to the cocaine? What happens to the prosecution? Because everybody eyes on this, and they said, you know, we've had drug seizures before, but we're not aware of huge sentences that come after this. And this one has been so much, it's gone viral that people are saying we must keep an eye on this and see what happens. So that will be something worth looking out for. Thank you for that, Mr. Amboch. And now on to something else. They talk about corruption at Africa's seaports. A recent report seems to indicate that our seaports are inefficient and seriously corrupt. Does this sound familiar? Have a look, have a listen.
However, the Anti-Corruption Network said a help desk and anonymous reporting system for distressed vessels had helped curb corruption demands. And since the system was launched, over 460 pre-notification arrivals have been processed, and incidents of corrupt demands by officials were significantly reduced. Some clearing agents at Lagos Port who spoke to German media outlet DW stated that it is challenging to clear goods without paying a bribe to the custom officials. Although this report was commissioned by the Lagos Port authorities, it also looked at and found similar corrupt and inefficient ports in other African countries, including in Ghana, Djibouti, Tanzania, and South Africa, amongst others.
There was a list. In fact, I edited that story, and the list was so long I took out some of the names. But it seemed as if every African port seemed to have been fingered as being corrupt. I was looking to see whether Banjul was there. It wasn't. But this took me back to a story we did on QTV just about a week or so ago, about GCCI, saying that because of corruption and inefficiency at the port, this is why the goods which come in huge volumes are expensive, because we're having to pay stuff we shouldn't have to pay for. So, as I said, and we said in the story, it's Lagos, but it could be anywhere.
Absolutely. And after that, actually, the Port Authority issued a statement saying that actually it's not really our fault. You have all the agencies, the maritime agencies, they all have their charges.
All the middlemen and women.
The middlemen and women. So they were, blaming all sorts of people. But would anyone be surprised by this?
This is it. Because
this is how we run our government. This is how we run things.
This is how we run our countries.
This is how we run
because
our countries,
when you look at it in South Africa, about 20 years ago, I did some research because I wrote an article about it about 20 years ago, when there's a lady, I wish I could remember her name. She was put in charge of the ports in South Africa because they were so corrupt and inept, and she turned it around. And the amount of revenue that the state was able to collect, she won awards all over the world for it. I suspect she's no longer there, because as I said, this was over 20 years ago. But apparently those ports in South Africa have kind of fallen back into bad habits, and officials working in them, and if people can find the report, they need to read it, because it says the people who work there end up getting very, very rich. And the reason they get rich is because of corruption, because as the ones in Lagos said, it's almost impossible to have your goods come through without you brightening somebody.
This is exactly the same here.
Yeah.
But recently, didn't they say that they had introduced some kind of software, digitalization, that would make it extremely difficult for these practices, as it were, to take place? We do not know, maybe. Sure. It might work, I do not know, maybe. It just depends. But nobody is surprised by this. Sure. This is how we do business. Hopefully technology will help, but still technology needs leadership. Sure. There must be that leadership. You know, technology by itself really on its own cannot do much.
Well, not only does technology help, but technology needs help, because apparently how they've kind of tighten things up in Lagos is by setting up an anonymous system where if people think something corrupt is happening, they can tell them anonymously, like this thing, and then they can track electronically that this left this port, it should have been cleared by now, why has it not? And they've been able to do that, and apparently that has made huge, it's kind of slashed it about 40%.
So man and machine there.
Working
together.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So hopefully when these systems are introduced and they're working well, perhaps that might help curb it. But without that, this is how we do business.
This is it. Yeah, sadly. Yeah, thank you. And sad to say that I've seen the business in this country being done exactly like that. So I know it's not a fantasy. Thank you for that. And that takes us on to our fourth story. Completely different, but we are about to initiate a national health insurance scheme. And they've been having seminars, course, workshops, conferences as to how we can make it work. How are we going to do it? Have a look.
When people pay a premium for certain thing, they expect services to be delivered. People will demand for services. People will demand for quality. People will complain on the press. People will go onto the internet, they will write and talk about it.
He said people will demand services, they will complain. You know, one of my big beefs with Gambia is that people don't complain enough. You go to a restaurant, you get rubbish service, and nobody complains about the rubbish service. But part of what we heard in that conference is about managing expectations. They're saying, yes, you will pay for this service, but you're not going to get everything. You're not going to get brain surgery on this service. You might have to pay a bit extra. A good idea, surely, to manage expectations.
Of course. And, you know, what kind of interventions? How are we going to prioritize these interventions?
As I said.
We've looked at other countries in Africa, where I certainly did, where they've got this national insurance scheme, health insurance scheme. You always tend to find that demand always exceeds what your budget
can manage. Quite.
Absolutely.
Quite.
So it just depends. But they've realized that when you focus on primary health care, you know, and taking into account cost effectiveness, they've worked very well.
This is it, yes.
It's just that perhaps beyond the primary health care, for other areas, the physicians, you'll find a shortage of physicians in that area.
Inevitably.
So I hope that we've done our homework, learned from others, and see how we can redress that in ours, you know, be prepared for
indeed.
what's to come.
Because this seems to be what they're trying to do. They're saying that they're going to have a list of interventions that you can have on the health service and others on the insurance scheme. And others that will be outside of it. So people aren't thinking, oh, I've paid, why don't I get this? They'll tell them. And they'll say, okay, this is the list. It's not going to be exhaustive, but there might be grey areas. There might be something that strays because you've got one condition, but if they treat that, they have to treat something else. So they might have those kind of caveats. But as you rightly say, in other African countries, they've prioritized and primary healthcare, and it's worked. So
and it's worked. So it might very well work here.
Sure. We certainly hope so. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And this now takes us to our fifth story. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, they recently came to the country and they looked at our country's economy. What did they think of it? I won't tell you. Let somebody else tell you. Have a look.
We see that the number of tourists arriving in the Gambia is rebounding compared to the pandemic period, but it's not back to the level before the pandemic yet. And we see that the construction activities staying robust. We see also that the agricultural production is also expected to be strong despite the flood that the country has seen recently.
There we heard from the IMF, and Mr. Mboj, amongst other things, they said that the kind of headline was that the rebound has not been as strong as we had predicted it would be. Were you surprised about that?
No, the Ukraine, Russia, go back to that, really. Just as we thought that we were emerging, coming out of the pandemic, because with the vaccine. So people thought, all right, very soon, and then bam, the unexpected events there, boy, events, they used to say. This is it. So no surprises there. Yes, tourism, how would it change? I do not know.
But this is it. I mean, and I'm glad he mentioned tourism and said, the numbers are coming back. But because during the pandemic, there were all these discussions, including with the tourism minister and ministry and people in the sector, saying that perhaps this is giving us a pause for thought. Should we change what it is we're offering to people as a tourist attraction to come to the Gambia? But I don't get the sense that we've done that. I think we're still advertising the same sort of thing, and we're still making the same offer to people come to the Gambia for sun, sea, and sand. But we need to change, but we haven't done so.
That's it, because if you want everything to be directed, if you like that, the Ministry of Tourism, look, if you want creativity, input, that's when you bring in the private sector. That's where you get the creativity. Totally. I mean, official dumb is just...
They have their place.
They have their place,
but they're not at the cutting edge.
They're not at the cutting edge. So that's what you do if you want to diversify, as it were, tourism and bring in interesting ideas, open it to the public. Indeed. They're the ones with the interesting ideas, not the ministry. So to my mind, that's the very problem itself. As it were, I'll probably get a Ministry of Tourism.
Exactly.
And whatever they do, I just give it to somebody else. That would be just simply legislation, enabling environment, as it were, and lots of private sector, hopefully.
That's right. That's it. And I think that's a beautiful spot at which to go for a break. And that takes us nicely to the break. And join us after the break for 5 more cracking stories. Don't go away. Join us after the break.
You've been looking for the perfect indoor router with long-range Wi-Fi coverage and faster internet speed connecting all your smart devices? Well, we present to you the QCell Indoor Router, a router that has all you need and much more. For just $4,275, you can get 4G plus internet speed, wide coverage, and connect up to 15 devices. And that's not all. The indoor router can be used for both office and home needs. So, enhance your internet experience with our indoor router. For more info, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sinubus, we innovate, others follow. To make sure your company's products and services reach your potential customers, it is essential that you choose the right channel for your marketing purposes. QTV has the widest reach locally and beyond, and we can give your business the visibility it needs. Call QTV Marketing on +220 324 4444 or email us at marketing@qtv.gm and take your business to the world.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, and here going through the stories with me, I have friend and colleague Mr. Mboj. Mr. Mboj, as ever, thank you for your interjections so far.
Thank you very much, Ade.
And we've got 5 more stories to go to. Now, when I start this one, you'll say, oh no, I've heard this before. What am I talking about? Women's participation in politics in the Gambia. Every week there seems to be somebody trying to do something about it. When will we just do it? Who knows? Have a look, have a listen.
This is to encourage women to participate fully in politics. Women do, we participate in politics, but not in decision-making body. When we say organizing committee or ASOBI or other issues, we say women. But when it comes to decision-making, women are sidelined. If you go to all these political parties, all the political party heads are men. There is no party leader who is a woman.
I feel slightly guilty even discussing this one, Mr. Mboj, because it's 2 men talking about women getting involved in politics and increased participation. But on the more serious note, as I said leading up to that, this keeps getting discussed at all sorts of forums and seminars and conferences, but we don't seem to be inching towards it actually happening. How do we make that happen?
This is it, because you have to carry society with you. And we all know how society moves.
Sure.
It moves generationally.
Sure.
In many ways.
Having said that, if I can interrupt quickly, the younger generation in our office, the men, whenever this comes up, they say, look, there doesn't need to be any special measures made, it will happen. As if some magic dust will be sprinkled and suddenly women will be getting represented and participating fully. It's not going to happen like that. Something radical, something revolutionary needs to happen.
Well, yes. It takes individual decisions, as it were, to make things happen. But again, when you look at it historically, really, for a very long time, women were not sent to school, really.
Right, yes.
Very few.
Sure.
So these historical injustices, really, that's what we are suffering from.
And even the thinking. Because since I've come here, I've met people who've married their daughters off at 16, 17 and said, you know, that's it, you're out of school. So, and that's in the last 2020 to 2022. So I've seen that firsthand.
That sort of thing,
sure.
And women not being part of the decision makers, you know,
sure.
that sort of thing. So it's only recently that new ideas about girl power,
yes, indeed,
gender equality, and that sort of thing recently that really seep through our thinking. And then now you have a lot of girls going to school.
This is true.
So when you look at this demographic change, as it were, then to my mind it bodes well for the future.
Sure.
They're going to school more. Working, more of them now going to work.
That's right.
And earn their money. You know that politics is a dirty business.
Yes, indeed.
You need lots of money, and the way it is, perhaps that will turn people off a little bit.
Well, indeed, because sometimes the kind of the nasty nature of sometimes the insults that are hurled, and people seem to find particular insults for women when women try and get involved in politics, and that puts some women off. Like, you know, I don't want to go there and be insulted like that. So yes.
Well, absolutely.
Yes.
And as the woman there said, I mean, they are very much involved in politics. The last time more women voted. that sort of
more
thing.
Women registered and more women voted.
More women voted.
Sure.
But this is it. So when it comes to the decision making, that radical part, I think that will take some time. I mean, we can force the issue and say quota system.
Sure. Which has come up because they've said, why don't even some of the political parties within their setup have a quota system and have women in key positions, not just kind of, you know, positions that sound important but really aren't, but, you know, real decision-making positions, and have women there, and those women can be an inspiration to others who come in and say, oh, there, she's there, I can get there one day.
Absolutely. So I rather don't mind this quota system at all. People think that when you bring in a quota system, then it becomes easier for women to just dumbing down. But you're not doing that, because even if I have a women-only shortlist, it's going to be highly competitive.
Exactly. You have to prove that you're worth it.
You have to prove that you're worth it.
Sure.
So unless we do that,
sure.
I'm very hopeful in the longer term, but in the short term, society always drags its feet. Society doesn't like to change much.
Well, this is it, and we're talking about a very conservative society, so I think it's a long road ahead.
It's a long road ahead.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. And now on to something else. Now, if you have people working in the criminal justice system, particularly in the police force, they need to be au fait and up to date with modern practices and systems. So, pleased to note that people from the GPF, Gambia Police Force, have been doing exactly that. Have a look.
The Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, KAIPTC, is one of the 3 peacekeeping training centers of excellence, mandated by the ECOWAS to offer training in peacekeeping and peace support operations in Africa. The internationally recognized institution has trained over 160 senior police commanders and supervisors in the Gambia. Momodou Sow, Deputy Inspector General of Police, speaking on behalf of the Inspector General of Police, congratulated the participants for successfully completing the 5-day course, which covered a range of teaching modules.
5-day course, is that enough? I looked at the course material and the subjects were quite good and quite broad, including modern methods of detection, etc., etc. But and we heard them being congratulated there, but 5 days, I don't want to downplay it, but surely they need 5 weeks, months, and ongoing.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't hear from that whether this was going to be an ongoing thing.
That is the key there. Perhaps they'll be having regular 5 days, as it were, over the course of the year, or over 2 years, or whatever might be. For me, the key thing is, after we go through this training, when we go back, what are we going to do differently?
Sure. And interesting you say that, because we always get participants at these conferences saying for our camera, when I go back, I'm going to implement what I learned on this course. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? They wouldn't say anything different, but will they? I mean, does the system exist for them to be able to do it? Because sometimes you need equipment, not just the will. There has to be some resource or resources for you to be able to deliver on this. Sometimes we don't have that.
Yeah, but absolutely. In this one, for executives,
yeah, sure.
I think particularly in the area, perhaps senior executives, sure. Really, because when it comes to thinking about operations, as it were, analysis,
yep.
What course of action to take, that higher order, as it were, yep. Kind of thinking. That's what we need. Sure. It appears that when we look at our police, mounting checkpoints,
and official and unofficial ones.
Yes, when it comes to demonstrations, when people demonstrate, how do you manage a crowd without having to hit them?
Sure.
As it were, there's a lot that we must learn. But when you look at our place, I do not know.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard in Sierra Leone, obviously not in the Gambia, a couple of lawyers actually been detained overnight for saying to people, if you feel dissatisfaction, take to the streets and protest, but don't do it violently. They've been arrested as I speak.
Yes.
I mean, so, these are the things that police officials need to know, that as others are now arguing on their behalf, what is our right? If this is a democracy, we should be able to protest, even in the streets, as long as we're not violent.
Absolutely. Sure. They tend to align themselves too much to
government. They think they're an arm of government.
They think they're an arm of government. Yeah. As we said here before, some people confuse the notion of government and the state.
This is it.
The state, that is for everybody. You are not there because governments change, they come and go. You shouldn't be like that. Sure. In fact, some of their behavior would cause people to riot.
Well, indeed.
You see, when I come to get a permit, I shouldn't even really need a permit. When I want to demonstrate, where I'm not using any loudspeaker or anything like that. And waiting for you to tell me, yes, you're my boss, you know, you give me the permission. No way, it doesn't work that way. So, and this is the sort of things that we see in the police. This is the stuff that they need to change. Would the training do that? I don't know.
I don't know, and will 5 days be enough? But that's another topic altogether. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Swiftly on to our 8th story. Again, another obsession of mine and of our colleague Mohamed Lamin Choi. We were discussing this, and then it came up that at the University of the Gambia, they were having a session about waste management, but not just any waste management, a particular type. What type? Have a look.
The enforcement of anti-littering laws that environment has since 15 years ago, and also enforcement of ban on plastic bag, especially the single-use plastic bag. So we found it necessary to at least start engaging the police to be part of the enforcement.
In addition to the general lack of public compliance with anti-littering laws.
Lack of compliance with anti-littering laws. Just heard our colleague Choi fading out there. We heard about police being sort of using it, which is another topic altogether. But this one was about segregation of waste, something we don't do. We just put all types of waste together. Now, just to bore people, where I lived in Bromley in England, there were actually 5 different types of bins that were collected from us. So on particular days, they would collect your food waste. On another day, they would collect plastic waste. On another day, paper waste, etc., etc. We're a long way from that. But at least somebody has thought about it, and they're trying to do something about it.
So this is it. Without the infrastructure,
sure,
then you're not going to get the behavior,
indeed,
as it were. Indeed. So yes, you would expect the university to be leading in things, you know. So quite interesting. There, the segregation metals, isn't it?
That's right.
Paper,
plastics.
So
on, yes. And they've got 16 bins that have been donated to them to kind of start this pilot project to see whether they can keep up with it on campus, and then sort of escalate it to all the other campuses.
Exactly.
Sure.
And then perhaps other organizations might see how it works, and then they copy it.
They start to emulate. Sure.
So it is certainly a good initiative for them. It's a brilliant initiative which could catch on, I suppose.
Well, it could, because in countries where they do have the segregation, what you have is that when you have only paper and only plastic, those ones, they can be recycled because they've been separated. And so, again, if I go back to where, even when you take it to a major, big sort of waste disposal place, they actually have people at the gate who ask you, what have you got? And you say, I've got plastic, I've got paper. You have to have segregated it. And they will tell you, okay, the paper goes there, the plastic goes there, etc., and the electronic waste goes somewhere else. And so, I know we're a long way from that, but as you say, it's good that the university has started this pilot, and they're kind of trying to get us to kind of go down this particular route.
That's it. We certainly expect them to be pioneering,
indeed,
you know, ideas, you know, to bring about social change. That's really what we want, isn't it?
Well, indeed, very much.
And then that's it. Perhaps that will catch on with other organizations.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. And now on to our penultimate story. Peace Corps. There was a kind of hiatus because of the pandemic, but then the latest batch of Peace Corps volunteers have arrived in the country. Agriculture and health is where they will be volunteering. Have a look.
I know we're the ones in suits and ties that work at the embassy, but when you're out there in the communities with your 14 colleagues doing the educational work, every day, 24/7, you are in fact representatives of the United States. In fact, you are more diplomats than we are, because you will be living and working in communities every day.
The Peace Corps is an independent agency and program of the United States government that trains and deploys volunteers to provide international development assistance. On September 22, 1961, legislation signed by former U.S. President John F. Kennedy gave birth to the United States Permanent Peace Corps. 55 years ago, in September 1967, the first peace volunteers arrived in the Gambia at the invitation of the Gambia government.
There we had, don't know how many minutes we've got, Mr. Mboj, but we've got two stories because we're always poor at managing our time here. But we heard about the Peace Corps there. I was one of those who had a good experience of Peace Corps teachers in Sierra Leone. And Peace Corps here first invited in 1967 by the Gambia government. And once, as we all know, John F. Kennedy had launched this. So generally, there's been a positive intervention here in the Gambia and in many countries.
Oh, absolutely. When I was at KYT, at the institute, I remember some courses. I used to go and used to go and mine the resources. I mean, there was this wonderful programmer.
Right.
He volunteered to teach, some of our students,
wonderful.
Programming. Oh, absolutely. And they will go to the remotest places.
Yeah, that was something else we discussed. And I have to, I held my hands up in the office and I said, some of the places that I've seen these guys are going to, even I, as an African, somebody who's lived in the Gambia, lived in Sierra Leone, there are places I would not live or stay. And yet these guys go there. And I have to be honest about that. If many people in urban areas watching this, if they're honest, they'll probably say the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, providing expertise in all areas, teaching, it's just a wonderful thing. And it doesn't even, and some of them do actually get married to.
Indeed, I think you know.
Absolutely, they got married to Gambian men. Absolutely.
I mean, proper integration. Because one of the things they do is they try and learn the language of wherever, if they're going to go to a fuller village. I've seen the booklet that they get given, it's quite thick. 80 or 100 pages, depending on where it's Fula, Mandinka, Wolof, etc., and they try and learn. They do a kind of short course before they get their placement, but then it's a continuous one.
Absolutely. So, I knew somebody is right now who used to go and teach them Wolof.
Right.
So they do all that sort of thing. He did that. So this is it. I'm sure a cynic might say something like, oh, some of them are probably spies.
That's always been said.
That's always been said.
But I've always said this about both Sierra Leone and the Gambia. When people say these things, the society is so open. I don't think you need to be a spy from the CIA to actually get to know stuff. You just need to befriend somebody and they'll tell you everything and they'll chat to you. So, but on the positive side, as you rightly say, they bring certain skill sets. Yeah. And there's a kind of dedication that I've always admired. I don't admire everything about America, but certainly the Peace Corps are one of those organizations that I've always had good experience of, and even my knowledge of what they've done. In fact, I'm planning an exhibition about Peace Corps in Africa, which will include obviously photographs from the Peace Corps through the years here in the Gambia. So I admire them.
That's it. And the idea of voluntarism, we are not really good at it.
Sure.
So that is one thing perhaps one can take from that, the notion of voluntarism, for the benefit of others. I mean, here the idea is quite patronizing, it's condescending, coming from America to help poor Africans and that sort of thing or wherever. But still, I like the idea that people volunteer to help, for a certain set of goals, to help others. It's a wonderful idea. I wish we were more like that.
Maybe they will inspire us one day to start being like that. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us to our final story. Another thing of mine, education, another obsession. I have many, as people will now know. Recently, we marked World Teachers' Day, and some teachers here had some very strong words to say on the subject. Have a look.
But I want to say today, all over the world, in 400 unions, in 100 countries, 33 million people are celebrating World Teachers' Day. This day was launched. World Teachers' Day was launched for the teachers to be under microscope, for people to give teachers the attention they deserve, for people to know that teachers deserve recognition. Transformation of education begins with teachers. We are not begging. We are asking for what belongs to us. We are demanding for what belongs to us. We are telling government to give us good working conditions.
you know, I almost have no issue with what she said there, except I would bolster it by saying, she said transformation of education starts with teachers. I would say transformation of any nation probably starts with teachers, Mr. Mbog. Fiery speech there and bang on point.
Absolutely, the passion,
sure.
Absolutely. Everything must begin with teachers. Some of us, people of my age, we tend to say now, reflecting, God, we were lucky.
I say that all the time,
yes.
You know.
There was a time in this country, anybody who was anyone had to become a teacher first.
Yes, quite.
All
yes,
the top brains,
they
were all teachers at some point.
Sure.
But gradually, once the colonialists left, we dismantled that and we came into our own.
Sure.
So the brightest in the class, some of us going what? Law, medicine, this and that. So the teaching profession's been gradually going down. You know, now we are scraping the bottom.
And we've heard this from the Vice President, and we've heard it from the Higher Education Minister, that this is a situation we need to turn around if we are serious about. You and I had a chat with him on State of Affairs, the Higher Education Minister, and it's about teaching, treating our teachers rather, in a way that says we value you and what you do, because it's important to the nation, it's important to society.
Absolutely. What have we seen in other societies? If you want to attract brains into the teaching field, you have to pay them.
Yeah, indeed.
Housing,
sure.
The perks, there's so much you can do really, so that you can get reasonably decent brains, decent minds into the teaching field. But now, whereas before perhaps one saw teaching as a vocation, now it seems it's just a job, which is not quite the same.
You know, I am one of these people who, fortunate or unfortunate, we kind of went through the transition, I should say, where we had teachers who felt and it was a vocation, and then later on we started getting teachers who, for them it was about making money. And I'll give an example. We had a Mrs. Streeter who she felt she could give us extra lessons for free. She never charged. She would just say, come to my house on such and such a day. And later on we had other teachers who thought, why should I give my time up to these blighters and not charge them? And they started charging. But Mrs. Streeter, she will always be in my heart because she felt passionate about making sure that we were the best that we could be. And I'm always grateful to her.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that generation, everybody's got sort of a teacher who really made a difference. I mean, even with our first president, Sadara Kerabachawara, apparently, you know, he came to Banjul when he was around 8. Right. And then afterwards, for 2 years or so, went back to Barajali. And then the father was like, well, now you can do the mathematics and stuff, the arithmetic and stuff. So you stay around. You're not going to go back. But the headmaster back in Banjul, MD Sala, kept on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until he came back to Banjul. Look at it. The rest is history. So teachers do make a huge difference. Sometimes, you know, when I'm in some difficulty, I'm angry or so, the words that always come to mind, my English teacher, they're like, words are like water. Once you spill them, you can never pick them up again. So that keeps me back. So teachers are really very important. They're always in our heads in one form or another, especially those who had influence on us when we were young.
Thank you for that, Mr. Birch. And in fact, I shocked somebody the other day by naming all of my teachers who have ever taught me. They're like, how did you remember all of them? I said, because they all made an impression. They left an impact. And I'm grateful that I am today what they and my parents made me. But my teachers, I've spent so much time with them. They had to be good. And they had to be kind and the best. And I didn't just name the good ones, I named the bad ones too, but I remembered them all. But that brings us nicely to the end. But to teachers, we say we should celebrate you every day, not just on World Teachers Day. And on that note, Mr. Mboch, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And to the viewers, thank you for watching. Until the next time, goodbye.